On April 9, 1865, Robert E. Lee met Ulysses S. Grant inside the McLean House in Appomattox, Virginia, to surrender the Army of Northern Virginia. With Lee's signature, the backbone of the Confederate military was broken. For most of the country, the 4-year struggle was effectively over. But on that exact same day, 800 miles away, in the swamps of Baldwin County, Alabama, a massive combat operation was reaching its boiling point. In 1865, news only traveled as fast as the nearest telegraph line or steamship. This created a deadly information lag, leaving the Union and Confederate armies on the Gulf Coast completely unaware that the war had already been decided in Virginia. Because of this silence, 20,000 men were about to commit to a major battle for a cause that was legally finished. Major General Edward Canby was in charge of the Union effort to dismantle the final Confederate strongholds in the Deep South. Canby's target was Mobile, Alabama, the last major Confederate port on the Gulf, but the city was protected by a network of fortifications that made a direct approach impossible. Fort Blakeley was the most critical of these obstacles. It guarded the intersection of the Tensaw and Appalachie rivers, functioning as the eastern gate to the city. Inside the fort, Brigadier General St. John Liddell held the line with 4,000 men. They were outnumbered 5-1, but they held the high ground behind a sophisticated set of defenses. Because Blakeley sat on the only viable route to Mobile's unprotected flank, Canby couldn't ignore it. He had to take the fort to take the city. The defenses at Blakeley were an uninterrupted 3-mile semicircle of earthworks, designed to force any attacker into a wide, exposed field of fire. This table shows the firepower Liddell had at his disposal. Across 9 redoubts, the Confederates managed to mount 35 artillery pieces, ranging from light howitzers to massive 30-pounder Parrott rifles. To protect these guns, the garrison cleared 600 yards of timber and constructed 2 rows of abatis, sharpened interlocking wooden fences designed to snag and slow down charging infantry. Beneath the mud in front of these fences, the Confederates buried hundreds of torpedoes. These were primitive landmines, intended to maim soldiers before they ever reached the main trenches. These combined obstacles meant a direct rush would be a bloodbath. Canby decided he wouldn't risk it. He would use engineering to get close first. Canby's engineers began a systematic approach, digging zigzag trenches toward the Confederate lines. These deep cuts and woven gabions allowed Union troops to move forward while staying protected from sharpshooters. For an entire week, the Union Army dug 3 successive rings of these parallel trenches. By April 9th, they had worked their way to within 600 yards of the fort. On the Union right flank, the front lines were held by Brigadier General John Hawkins' division, 5,000 African-American soldiers of the United States Colored Troops. For the USCT, the battle wasn't just a military objective. They were fighting in the heart of the South to secure the very freedom they had recently gained. By the afternoon of the 9th, Canby had his artillery in place and his infantry poised in the trenches. He had built a machine designed to crush the garrison through sheer, overwhelming mass. This map shows the final Union investment. At 5:30 p.m., Canby ordered 16,000 men to charge the 3-mile Confederate perimeter. On the right, USCT regiments pushed through concentrated fire, climbing through the abattoir and buried mines to reach the redoubts. The numerical pressure was too much for the 4,000 defenders. In just 30 minutes, Union troops breached the earthworks, forcing Liddell to surrender his garrison. The assault resulted in a total collapse of the Confederate defense, but the victory was purely local. Mobile would fall 3 days later, but the wider war had already been decided in Virginia hours before the first man at Blakeley even climbed out of his trench. The cost of that half hour was roughly 150 Union and 75 Confederate soldiers killed. Another 2,800 Confederates were taken prisoner. Grant later criticized the entire operation as a waste of resources, arguing the fort would have surrendered on its own once Mobile was isolated. However, for the USCT, the battle remained a significant demonstration of their capability under heavy fire. Today, historic Blakeley State Park preserves these earthworks. These modern maps still track the exact locations of Redoubt 5 and the original Union lines, keeping the physical evidence of the struggle visible. Fort Blakeley remains a record of the war's final major engagement, a battle fought with total conviction for a conflict that had already ended.